Okay, so we're now going to go over this last question 5 in this exam. So, it's really important that when you're in the exam, even if you don't finish all of this question 5, it has lots of little tasks on. When you get to the end of it, even if you've not finished it, you need to make sure that you bounce it out. My students just did this paper, and so many of them didn't quite get to the end of question 5. They weren't watching the clock, and they didn't submit any of question 5. They didn't bounce it out. There, you've missed 24 marks. This is out of 105, this exam. So if you miss 24 marks, that's quite a big proportion of the exam. You know, you're talking the difference between a C and an A, or a B and an A star. Okay, so lots of people may have done significantly worse than they wanted to do because they didn't balance this question out. Well, there's so many marks available just for short, little, quick tasks. So let's go through them now in this video. So we need to compress the lead vocal and the backing vocals. We need to make sure it can be heard above all other parts, and that the dynamics of the vocals are quite even, so there's not huge dynamic range in the vocal, and there's 3 marks there. So it shouldn't take us any more than about 4 or 5 minutes. Well, we've got our vocal tracks across 3 different tracks at the minute, because we've got harmony, we've got our edit track that we did before, and our main one. So I'm going to make a track stack so I can edit them all at once. So I'm going to right click with them all selected and make a summing track stack here. And I can call it vocals. Now if I put a compressor on here, it's going to affect all of those vocal tracks. Okay, so I'm going to put a stereo compressor on there. Let's hear what our vocal sounds like in our mix currently. So it can be heard quite clearly, but I think later here, when other things get a bit louder, it gets a bit lost in the mix. And then we've got these really loud, we can see them, these really loud parts that are definitely going to be too loud, and the quiet bits before them here at bar 29 are going to be too quiet. Have a listen to this. So the always was way too quiet, and the I won't stop was way too loud. So we need to, this would be a good area to loop around when we're doing our compressor, because we've got a really quiet bit and a really loud bit. So that will work well for setting correct compression parameters. If you remember in the previous question, actually, we described what sort of compression parameters would need to be used on this vocal. So we've actually already explained for 8 marks what we need to do. Now we just need to actually do it in this question, okay? So we've got our compressor on here. And like we said in the previous question, we're going to need a low threshold so that it's quite lots of compression occurs to a majority of the vocal. So I'm going to turn that threshold down so that even the quiet bit might even be going over the threshold. But the loud bit is definitely going over the threshold. So I'm watching this meter and I need to see gain reduction happening while this vocal's playing. I might just solo it for now. Yeah, so we could see it was moving quite quickly there as the vocal was coming over the top of it. Even the quiet bit as well, so that's good. And then we described the such big dynamic range in this vocal part. We probably want quite a high ratio, as we discussed in the previous question. So I'm going to go for a ratio of about, let's try 6 to 1 here, okay? And I'm going to turn Logic's auto gain feature off, because that might confuse me a little bit. We discussed in the previous question as well, we would want the attack to be as quick as possible. And the release I'm just going to leave on auto, because we don't want these loud vocals to come through and then get compressed. We want them to be immediately compressed. So we could talk about the knee as well. We could have that to be quite a soft knee, so it's less sudden, the compression, in the way the ratio is applied. So I'll put that up at quite a high value here. And then I can, because we're compressing, we're turning the vocal down, I can add some gain back on here with the makeup. So when it goes, I won't stop, the compression's quite intense. So I'm just going to turn the ratio down a little bit. That's sounding pretty good to me. So it's much more consistent. Let's listen to this phrase without the compression. You'll be really quiet and then really loud. And with the compression,
Always, I won't stop.
that quieter part is much more consistent, meaning it's going to be able to stick out on top of the mix. Now let's just make sure it's actually louder than the other instruments. It can be heard on top of it. So we might have to turn some of the other instruments down. So I can see I'm clipping on my master bus there. So I'm just going to turn everything down a little bit.
I won't stop. Always, I won't stop. Forever.
So that sounds pretty good. Sounds nice and clear over the top of the other instruments. And we don't need to worry too much about the mix at the minute because we're going to do that at the end. So now we need to apply an automated filter. So it tells us we need to use automation. Filter to the vocal. Only on the word you. And its repeat in 26 and 27. So anytime we hear the word you and its repeat in 26 and 27, we need to do this. So use a high pass filter with a steep roll off or a steep slope. Automate the filter so the vocal becomes smoothly becomes thinner. Okay, smoothly, quite a key word there. So we're in 26, 28, and we need it to high pass filter to be automated up. So let's have a look at that. So 26, 28. So during these bars from the word you, we need to get it to be getting thinner over time. So we're going to use an EQ for that. So what we want is a high pass filter with a steep. So this is our high pass filter, and we need to automate it so it cuts off the low frequency of the vocal, making it sound thinner over time. And we want to do it with a steep roll off. So I'm going to make the slope as steep as it goes in Logic here. And I will automate this parameter, this cutoff here, so that it gets thinner over time. So let's do it just in these bars. So I'm going to go press A for automate. Notice I've got my EQ on my track stack, so it's going to apply on all the vocals that are within that track stack. Well, I don't want to automate volume, so I'm going to click on volume. I want to automate the EQ here. And I want to automate the low cut. So I want to cut the low, so I want to automate the low cut frequency here. Well, I only want to do it on these bars, so I'm going to just make sure that it's at 0 at any other point, but then in these bars, it's increasing. So I don't want it to, oh, let's do volume still, sorry. Let's go back to, it's because it needs to be here. I was doing it on the wrong track, so it needs to be here on this vocals summing track. So we need to make sure it's 0 or 20 hertz at the start, that's fine. And then in these bars from 26, we're going to automate it to increase smoothly, so a nice straight line I'll do. Well, let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Yep, so that got thinner over time, and then back after this, we need to make sure that the vocals sound normal after that, so then automate the filter to go back to its normal value.
Never stop loving you. Always.
And then back on always, the vocals back to normal. And you can actually see that automation occurring here on the EQ.
Never stop loving you.
So nice and easy few marks there. Not a bad question at all. I don't know what I've done with my, let me just open that again. Don't know what I've done with the question paper. Let's have a look. Past papers. This is the spec paper, A2C4. There we go. Okay, so we've done that. We've done our automated filter. We've done our compression. We need to apply stereo double tracking just to the backing vocals, okay? The double tracking should be hard panned. So there's a few ways we could do this, but I'm just going to do it sort of a manual way, okay? A really manual way. So the backing vocals should be doubled and hard panned. So let's have a look at that. So that's on these harmony tracks here. I'm going to come out of automate mode. So I'm just going to duplicate them so I can select over them like this, hold option and drag down. And that will recreate my track. I'm going to pan them hard left and hard right. And that will create a somewhat doubling effect, but it's not going to be super double because the timing is the exact same And in a doubling effect, we like the timing to be a little bit different.
Always, I won't stop. Forever, I won't stop.
So what I'm going to do is actually get these backing vocals to be slightly out of time with one another. So there's a few ways I can do this. I'll just do it manually for now. So I'm just going to select these this first harmony track here, the one that's panned left, and I'm just going to zoom in so I'm really close, and I'm just going to throw them slightly out of time so it has a real doubling effect, just ever so slightly out of time. And this other one, the one that's panned to the right side, I might just make them a touch earlier. So then it sounds a bit more like an actual doubled effect, because it sounds like multiple takes, because they're slightly on different sides and now slightly out of time with one another. You could achieve this with a chorus or a stereo delay as well. You just need to make sure the feedback was on 0 on your delay.
Always, I won't stop. Forever, I won't stop.
So that sounds much more like a doubled effect now, rather than when they were just perfectly in time with one another. So really easy question there that just gets us some simple marks. Okay, now a 6 marker. We need to listen to the effect on the R in 2 to 5 and recreate that same effect in bar 7. Okay, so let's have a listen to that. So 2 to 5, what's the vocal effect here? So hopefully you could hear that is a delay, okay? Now it's a 6 marker, so there's probably some intricacies around this delay. You're not going to get 6 marks just for putting a delay on something. So we need to make sure we get the timing right and anything else about this delay. So let's put our click on and see what the time of this delay is. So it starts sort of here, halfway through beat 4. And the actual delay starts here halfway through beat 2. So it's half bar delay or a minim delay. Okay, let's listen to that again. And notice the delays are getting filtered each time, aren't they? The delays don't sound, the echoes, the taps, they don't sound the exact same as the dry vocal or the original vocal. They sound like they're getting filtered, like a tape delay, okay? So that's probably where we're going to get our other marks. And then let's think, how many taps are there, or how long does it decay for? Okay, so it delays, it feedbacks for quite a long time, really, doesn't it? Pretty much all the way up to... So it feedbacks from about halfway through bar 3 here, all the way up to bar 7, so almost about 4 bars. Okay, so we need to make sure there's a really long feedback or high feedback percentage on this. So I'm just going to grab this word here by splitting the vocal. So I'm going to grab this word here, which is the one we've got to do. If we look back at the question paper, we can see the R in bar 7, that's this. So I'll just trim around this. Trim the other side of it. And I can, like we were doing before, I can just hold Option and drag down to a new track, and it will make an exact copy of whatever's on that track. And I can call this vocal delay. Okay. So now we just need to copy what we said. So we said it was a minim with quite a high feedback where the filter is sort of changing on the delays. So let's have a look at how we could do that. Let's choose a delay. Let's choose a tape delay, because we know tape does that sort of effect. So we're going to set this to be a minim, so half a bar there. And we are going to set it so that it becomes filtered over time. So if we listen to how this gets filtered, if we listen back to the example, It's sort of mid-rangey, so it's like the high frequencies and some of the low frequencies are kind of being removed as it echoes. So we can choose here, where it says character on this delay, the EQ of just the echoes. So let's get rid of some of the low stuff and get rid of some of the high stuff. Like this. Let's turn the feedback up a bit. Let's listen to how ours sounds at the moment. That's sounding pretty good. I think theirs has a bit more high frequency, so I'll maybe open that up just a touch there. That sounds about right. And I might, to add that sort of tape effect, I might put some of this flutter, which is like pitch wow in there. Some of this modulation. I think it has a bit of that. And let's make sure our vocal is a similar delay, is a similar volume to the delay in the example. So the delay is really quite loud at the start. It's like the similar volume to the actual dry vocal. So I'm going to make sure the wet value is fairly high. And then I want it to continue for about 4 bars, because we said before it starts here halfway through 3 and goes... goes pretty much all the way up to halfway through bar 7, so it needs to last for about 4 bars. So we want ours to go up to into bar 11 at least. So let's check if ours does that.
I can stop my heart.
Yeah, that sounds good. It was still going actually a little bit, so I'll just turn it down a little bit, but it's a really long feedback. So there was lots of things you had to pick up there, and that's why it's a 6 marker. You had to think it was a delay that was a minim. It was a delay where there was some EQ changes on the delays, like a tape delay. You also had to get the volume of the delay in the compared to the dry vocal, so the dry and wet right. Then you also had to get the feedback right. So there was a lot of parts there, which is why it was a 6 marker, but not too difficult, just using your ears and using what you know about delay. Okay? Now we need to apply some reverb to all parts to give a sense of ambience across the mix. Okay, so this is where a lot of my students also made some errors or didn't do this in a very good way. The worst way you could do this is going onto your mixer, coming to the stereo out track, that's the track that everything comes out of, and just putting reverb on there. That's not a good idea, because you would never do that. Maybe in very certain circumstances when you're mastering, you might do that, but you would never do that because you're applying the same reverb to absolutely everything. And some things need more and less reverb. You have no control of that. And like a kick drum, for instance, we wouldn't put like a kick drum through reverb. And certain things need more reverb than others. We have no control if we do that. That's a really bad way to do it, and would lose you lots of marks. Another really bad way I saw people do it was going onto every single track as an insert effect and putting individual reverbs on everything. It's going to waste lots of time, and every time you want to change it, you've got to go onto the reverb on every single channel. What they are definitely 100% wanting you to do here is use an auxiliary track, and we've done this lots in class, but I'll show it one more time. An auxiliary track allows us to put a reverb on a separate track and send things accordingly to it and mix it in really sort of easily, okay? Really sort of easily. So let's do that now. So I'm going to go to where it says sends here. And I can do it a really quick way. If I want to send all these things to reverb in some sort of way, I can hold shift and select all the tracks like that. Now when I go to my sends, it'll send them all there. So I'm going to click sends, bus. I'm going to find the first empty bus here, so bus 2. And it gives me a new yellow auxiliary track here at the bottom. And I'm going to call that reverb. And I need to put my reverb on that one channel, mono to stereo. We want our reverb to be stereo. And let's go for a good, general rule of thumb is to go for something kind of nice and open, like a concert hall, and maybe about 2 seconds. Notice when we put a reverb on an auxiliary track, it's 100% wet. That's what we want it, 0% dry, 100% wet when we're doing an auxiliary track. And now you can see all of our channels are connected to this reverb, but we're not sending anything to the reverb yet. So what in a mix would have lots of reverb? Well, The vocal would probably have quite a bit of reverb on it. So let's send that first of all. So let's listen to our vocals and send some to reverb.
I can't
So on my vocal bus here,
my
turn this auxiliary up.
heart from loving you. I know I won't ever stop loving you.
So that's an appropriate amount of ambience and reverb on a vocal there. Okay, let's listen to another instrument. This is our synth one. We could send a bit of reverb on this synth. That would be nice. So let's just increase this value here. That sounds good to me. Right, this synth riff. Now, it's quite bassy at times, and we don't like to put lots of reverb on bass instruments, so we need to be careful of how much reverb we put on this. Just a touch. That's fine. Then we've got some drums. Now, you've got to be very careful here. Kick drums, we would never really send, we don't like to send kick drums through a lot of reverb, so I'm just going to put a tiny amount of reverb on the drums. Drums lose their punch and their attack when we put reverb on them. They have more depth, they sit further back in the mix. We want our drums, especially in this style, to be nice and loud, so we wouldn't put a lot or any reverb on really, so I'm just going to put a tiny amount on there. And then the nice thing about this being an auxiliary track, I can control the amount of reverb on everything just on one fader here. So I'm going to sort of mix that into taste now.
I can't stop my heart from loving you. I know
I'll maybe put that synth through the reverb just a touch more.
I won't ever stop loving you.
So that's an appropriate amount of reverb there. Some people just absolutely smothered their track in reverb on a stereo out. That's not what they're looking for here. Okay, so then we need to do our final bit, which I'm going to do all together, which is balancing the mix, which is really important. We're not balanced at the minute. And then we are going to produce a final mix, okay? Very few of my students got 3 for 3 on this, and there's no excuse for it because it's very easy. So we're going to ensure the mix is very is a loud mix, so it's maybe anywhere between about -6 and -3 on the stereo out. We don't want it to be going too much over that because we definitely don't want it to distort or clip. We're not going to use any limiters or compression on the mix output. And then we need to make sure that at the start and at the end, there's no like delays still going on. So we need to make sure that the delays are completely finished at the end. So enough space. And we want no more than a second of silence at the beginning and end. Okay, so let's do all those things. 6 marks there. Okay, oh, I've just closed the paper, but hopefully we won't need it again. So let's do the balance. So let's listen to a fairly busy bit where there's lots going on, like this part here. And we need to think, in a mix, in an electronic mix, what should be the loudest things? Well, the vocals should be the loudest thing, and the drums should be the second loudest or first loudest thing. Okay, so let's get the vocals and drums nice and loud. So my vocals are really going quite high on the fader and could potentially, when mixed with other things, cause us to clip. So I'm just going to bring them down a bit. A few decibels here. And my drums could probably be a bit louder here. And I've got 2 drum tracks, don't I, here? So I'm going to make sure they are both fairly loud. Okay, that sounded good to me. Both nice and loud. Let's bring in our synth. So I'd say that's just a touch too loud. It's kind of getting in the way of the vocals a little bit. So I'm just going to back it off a little bit. And then, because the vocals are most important in pop music, they need to be heard on top of everything else. And then we've got our bass slash sort of lead synth thing. Okay, so that's sounding pretty good to me. And now I'm watching my stereo out fader, and if I click here, it'll reset. And I'm making sure it's nice and loud, coming up about -6 here, but never going over 0. Okay, so I'm just watching this, and it gets sort of loud around here, so I'm just going to make sure it never gets too loud. So about -4 there. So the loudest it's getting is about -1, but it's never clipping. That's fine. So now we just need to check our lead in and lead out times. So what I'm going to do is remember where you set this cycle region is the bit that bounces. So at the start, if we listen to the very start, and I can put my timer on here at the top, it's given us about a second and a bit of just silence at the start. We can't bounce that out. We're going to lose marks. So we need to make sure our cycle region is pulled in a little bit. So we only have, a very small bit of lead-in time. And then at the end, they tell us there's other effects and stuff on some of these tracks, so we need to make sure the sound is sort of fully died out at the end here before we bounce out. So this synth riff has like a delay on it, doesn't it? So we need to make sure that delay is fully died out. And I could look at the waveform, and I could still hear it just for a touch more at the end. So I can definitely not hear anything by about the latter half of 38 there. They don't want that really obvious cut at the end. So I'm going to go to about there. Okay, once you're happy with all that, you're ready to bounce. Remember, we don't want to be going File, Bounce, Project Section. We can just do Command B. That's the fastest way to do it. So Command B. And then we're going to do this as a high quality file, so a PCM, WAV, 16-bit, 44.1. It'll already be set like that because you've done that for all your other questions. And you're going to make sure normalize is off. And then you can press OK and save that to where your teacher tells you to. And then you would have completed all the practical and written bits for the first bit of the paper, and you'd only have your small long response, your sort of short essay long response C4 essay to do there at the end. Thank you for watching.